May I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from August 23rd.
Second?
Seconded.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Battles?
Yes.
Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes. Whistler? Yes.
Thank you. Next up is warrants payable. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve warrants payable in the amount of $1,038,080.11.
Second.
Any discussion? That seems like a lot of money.
A lot of
It-
blood.
It is, and it was the last payment for the pool.
Oh,
So there were a couple of payments to COP construction for the water rehab, the pool,
And a new
and
plow
a
truck.
new, or a new plow truck. That was a significant portion of it. So that was, so it all hit at once.
do we have the plow truck now?
We'll hopefully have by the end of the month, but we have found one, that all our.
Hey, are you ready to get in your average state?
Uh-huh.
For 2 years.
Well, that's great. So, any further discussion? Roll call.
Battles?
Yes.
Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
We did approve the minutes for both dates, correct?
I just said the August 23rd, so that was my fault if we were trying to do them together.
Oh, thank you.
So anyway,
Well,
I move to approve that we approve the September 13th minutes.
I second it.
any further discussion on those? Roll call?
Battles? Yes. Fratelli?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Keaton?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Whistler? Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we're up to mayor's comments. First of all, the short-term rental meeting this week has been postponed. It's going to be moved to the next week because that is the evening of the debate for the candidate forum. The second thing is that I would like to appoint both James Caniglia and Tara Mastel to the Urban Renewal District Board. And thank them very much for showing an interest in serving on that board. And the third thing is, if we have some flood updates, Jim, do you have any flood updates? Or I know you've got that.
Flood updates, we have everyone back on permanent water, the temporary water is all off now. We got it. We
Good
had
job,
a new
Jim.
FEMA person come, which is about the mitigation of the stuff in the creek, the actual what could be done, who's gonna do it, regarding to the raise of the creek, the trees and stuff throughout and so we went from one end of the city to the other with them, and hopefully they're gonna work with the county. We're gonna have a combined meeting between St. County and city, and hopefully see some action. I did, on part of that state deal, I see they are gonna mitigate some of that in the creek between the Boxcar and 19th Street Bridge. They are gonna be doing some of that work, but it's a long-term deal, but hopefully this new group that's here, it's only our 15th female person we've met or whatever, but like I said, it looks like they're here to actually look at some of that we can prevent future problems with what happens, so.
Can I ask a real quick question? It's in regards to this, the observation deck that's down
Yes, that's
close by
in-
next, is that gonna be
that's
handled?
Part of it, that's a part of it they're looking at also, and the county has jumped in, and the private homeowners over there have actually taken that out, but that's all a part of this, what they will and won't pay for, and how they will, and who will do the work. That's the part that comes down to, whose job is it to do this work? And the state waterways, when we had a state representative here too, going through there, and so hopefully we'll see the results of getting some of that done. Now is the time of year, low water, winter time before the ice is the time to get that stuff done. So we're hoping that will lead us in that.
And then Courtney, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll expand on a couple of
of areas that Jim already talked about. So the NDT project, there's a lot of still, decision points to be made because they're between flying LiDAR and assessing Rock Creek, as is, not using the data that was there prior to the flood. They're trying to use, the current conditions. So that's what's taking a little bit more time I think they kind of have an idea of what they want to do, but once they have good hydrology to make informed decisions, I think we'll see more movement there. If, they have a public information officer, and you can sign up to receive that information. I think Danae also, she's on that list, so if she gets it, she'll also forward it through our Google groups. So if you are signed up on our Google groups, you will hopefully see those MDT updates. The boardwalk, pier, walkway to the unknown, I did receive a permit for that yesterday from an engineering firm. It'll be noticed in the paper this week, so we're open for public comment. If you want to review, that's for any permit I receive. I have been getting a lot more permits over the last week for various projects. So if you see an address in the paper that kind of piques your interest because you live near it, you just want to know, you're welcome to reach out and look at the materials and provide public comment that I can take back to the applicant. And I've also, I think that the project with the coal flag that's kind of sloughing off, I got an email from the engineers working on that. I think that's starting to pick up again too. I think they've been able to do enough of the surveying that they're ready to move forward with permitting for that, but I don't have that permit yet, so.
Thank you. So the next thing on the agenda is public comments, and this is a period when any of you can approach the podium and speak for 3 minutes on any kind of thing that you have to talk about, as long as you state your name and address and, keep it civil. But I just so you know, this is our time to listen to you. It's not our time to answer your questions, because you get 6 different answers. And we need time to process those questions and find out what the answers are. And if it became an issue, we would issue a statement. But if you want an answer to a question immediately, then please don't hesitate to call City Hall, because, you can talk to Courtney in planning, you can talk to Jim in Public Works, you can talk to me, you can talk to Lonnie, you can talk to our Chief of Police who just stepped out. But, so, I don't want you to feel like your comments are falling on deaf ears. It's just we're trying to follow the protocols of how the meetings are supposed to go. So with that, if anybody'd like to come to the podium and tell us, something about something that's on the agenda or something not on the agenda, anything related to the city business.
My name is Steve Rice. I live at 215 Nutty, in the Nutty subdivision. And my neighbors received a letter from Greg O'Neill about possibly a land transfer behind our property lines. And we were wondering what it might all be about, and would like to be informed on what it could possibly be.
Thank you very much. And like I said, call City Hall tomorrow morning, and we can have a longer conversation about it.
So we're in, yeah, we're in Ward 2. Thank you.
We'll share.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sandy Conley, 307 Canyon Avenue South. The planning board had received a flyer that I did provide to Terry from a company called American White Water. And what they do is when there's a flood event like this one, they can go into the creek, which is gonna have to be mitigated anyway, and actually create a whitewater park. There's one in Missoula, and a second one's going in. So that's something I hope everybody considers. I have no idea what they charge, but it's the way you dredge it that makes it so that you can actually go through in kayaks like they used to do, and they put in at the boxcar and pull out at 19th. So it was really interesting group. I'm trying to find someone to get a hold of to do a full-on presentation, but I hope that that goes through your minds as well.
Thank you very much. Anyone else with a comment? Anyone online that has a comment? All right, last call for comments. Okay. Thank you very much. Next up is, oh, yeah. Thank you very much. So we have a request from DSBS, to DSBS being Domestic and Sexual Violence Services, to proclaim October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I'll read you the proclamation. In the city of Red Lodge, in recognition of the important work done by survivors, domestic violence programs, and victim service providers, I urge all residents to actively participate in the schedule of activities and programs sponsored by Domestic and Sexual Violence Services to work toward the elimination of intimate partner violence. Whereas, in just one day across the U.S. and its territories, nearly 75,000 victims of domestic violence sought services from domestic violence programs and shelters. And whereas the impact of domestic violence is wide-ranging, directly affecting individuals and society here in this community, throughout the United States and the world. And whereas racism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, and discrimination based on physical ability, nationality, or any other factors help to perpetuate domestic violence and make finding safety even more difficult for some victims. Whereas the need for safe housing continues to be rated as a survivor's most urgent need. Whereas Red Lodge joins with others across Montana and the nation in supporting victims of domestic violence, as well as local programs, state coalitions, national organizations, and other agencies nationwide who are committed to increasing public awareness of domestic violence and sending a clear message to abusers that domestic violence is not tolerated in Red Lodge. And whereas domestic violence impacts millions of people each year, but it can be prevented. Preventing domestic violence requires the collective voice and power of individuals, families, institutions, and systems to transform our communities. Now, therefore, I, Kristen Cogswell, Mayor of the City of Red Lodge, do hereby proclaim October 2022 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So thank you for that reminder, and thank you for bringing that to my attention.
And thanks, Mayor, for doing that. It's obviously something that's really important to me, as I worked there for 10 years at Domestic and Sexual Violence Services. And, you know, in the proclamation, it talks about the people that are working towards eliminating violence. And it's not only the people at DSBS, but it's people, there's a victim witness advocate at the county, our law enforcement, not only in the city, but in the entire county, that are working towards eliminating violence in our communities. So I think it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is a slate of things going on this month, and you can go on DSBS's website and see those, including some education for grown-ups on healthy relationships. We're going to take Power Up, Speak Out, and make it for adults this month. And I'll be on the Les King show with our new attorney. So DSBS has an attorney specifically for clients that's here every Friday. And I'll be attending the Les King show with Alex to kind of dispel some myths about domestic violence in our community and across the state.
So there you have it.
Mayor,
Yes.
I can't tell you the importance of this organization. I know firsthand the fear and the terror in some people that they receive, and when they know that they could go to an organization like this, it just like the weight of the world is lifted off of them. And we should do everything we can to support their effort and similar efforts anywhere.
Thank you, Pete. It's very important to our community, so thank you. All right, next up is old business, council approval of the committees. It's required of the Urban Renewal District, and I think I would prefer that the short-term rental committee also be approved. So first, if I could have a motion to, for council to approve the Urban Renewal District Committee.
I'll move to approve the Urban Renewal District, board, we call this board, I think. Board, but committee, yes. I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Is this approving who you've assigned to it?
Yes.
Oh, consent.
And I probably should have done it the first day, but I do.
Just clarifying what we're.
It's clean
voting
enough.
on.
And then we have two new members today, so it's just a clean sweep. No further discussion? Roll call?
Battle? Yes. Curtelli?
Yes.
Irvin?
Yes.
Eaton?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Whitworth? Yes.
And may I have a motion for council approval of the short-term rental committee members?
I move to approve the short-term rental committee members.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Battle? Yes. Curtelli?
Yes.
Irvin?
Yes.
Eaton?
Yes.
Ronnie? Yes. Whitworth? Yes.
The next up is ordinance number 959, establishing a solid waste management system, including collection and disposal of solid waste, adoption of a recycling facility for the collection of recyclable materials, and addition of Title 14 solid waste. And that's up for discussion. So who would like to introduce this discussion?
Well, I can tell you what you're looking at.
All right.
Give you a little
I'll do
history. So, if you look at the municipal code today, there's nothing in there that describes your solid waste, except for literally, 4 sentences under, public health and safety nuisances. So, since we started the discussion on recycling, it seemed like a good place and a good time to introduce to the city a full solid waste ordinance that describes how our city handles and manages solid waste on the whole. So, that's really the origin of it. And the portion of it where it says, and to add Title 14, if you look at municipal code, there's nothing in there about solid waste at all, except for those nuisances. So, so just to make it clear to everyone, if we were to discuss and modify and pass this ordinance, we would have another section in our municipal waste that explains to the public how this is done within the city.
Thank you. Terry.
That's okay. I'll answer to either one. So first we wanted to, actually the Public Works group here met this morning and we realized the amount of work that Jen and Teresa have done generating all this stuff. So we wanted, and Jones too. Of course, she was in our committee meeting. Anyway, so we wanted to thank you guys for all the work you did, but when we were discussing it, we wanted to talk about maybe some things that we should consider as a group. And one of them is on the recycling program. Since that is something that we're not doing now, we talked about bringing it up as something that the city council would vote on, of decoupling that from the ordinance. And that would avoid a long-term commitment by the city. And then the other thing we wanted to perhaps consider is a recycling-specific ordinance, and I think Jody had done it before, and then maybe have yours, which is good, because yours seems to the way I read it, seems to key in on recycling and commercial and residential waste guidelines and general services, which is good. But instead of having the recycling embedded in there, have that referred to in the other ordinance.
So you have basically you have two different ordinances within solid waste.
Yeah, or just having it referenced, that way we're not committed long-term to recycling depending on what happens.
There's a million ways to approach it.
Yeah,
In fact,
well,
it's more rework.
okay, and then the other thing I just wanted to say, and then I'll let these guys chime in, was that one of the ideas was to commit to like a 2-year trial period to evaluate the program in 2 years when the current contract for waste disposal is up for review. And so, anyway, I'll let the other people, interject.
I'd like to speak on this. I realize the hard work you put in to form this ordinance. I want to tell you what I see. There's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of things in that what it's going to do, it's going to tie the public works hand. It's going to tie the staff's hands. It's going to tie their hands. It's going to tie your hands. If you pass that ordinance right now, in the future, it's going to tie your hands on what availability you can do or change in this solid waste. We have a solid waste program. We do these contracts and it comes up to an RFP and we get many companies put in their deal. And I'm the one who I said, I think we need to take the solid waste on as a 2-year trial period. I came to work here in 1998. The city and Allied Waste at the time were partners in the recycling center. Continued to lose money, then they changed, they became Republic. The Republic pulled out. They wanted nothing to do with it. The city pulled out. Since the nonprofit took over, the recycling has been doing good. They're not going to make any money. Recycling is not a money maker. It's granted, I believe in recycling too. But we get involved in this. I have a feeling you're going to say, you're saying right now you're going to charge everybody in the city. Has this gone out to everybody in the city? Have you talked to every citizen at $6 a month? It ain't going to be long to be at $10 a month. What are they getting for their dollar? The same thing that's happening today under what's going on under a volunteer nonprofit who have more options to get money elsewhere than the city would have. I believe the gals went through and the funding, the way they said it would work, it probably will just work on that. But I'm telling you, don't tie the hands with this ordinance here. And she put an ordinance out here a month ago or 2 months ago about taking it, but the only thing I saw about that one is put it on a 2-year trial basis, which brings us up to that 2025, and let's see what happens, because recycling is not a profitable deal, and the taxpayers are going to pay that money on their taxes to recycle. I'd rather see that money go to the Public Works Streets Department under a street deal. We could pave and put curb and gutter in. What you're getting for your tax dollars is not recycling. I'm sorry, recycling is a good thing, but I don't see the city as it being a problem. There's more cities, no cities have it. Whitefish is one of the last ones in the state that got rid of it because you can't afford to keep putting your dollar at something it's not going to return anything. It's going to be costlier and costlier. The trucking's going up, everything will go up. You're going to recycle, you're going to pay to have it hauled away, and you're not going to see the benefit of it. When you go to read notes, there was a deal in there about if you negotiate, we're showing we're taking more tons out, that we're going to have a leverage against them. I've been through 3 negotiations with the garbage companies. There's no leverage in that. We've been doing recycling. It's a good thing. It works. But the city taking it over, I don't see it that it's going to be something that you're going to revisit it. You're going to add the tax. You're going to add more tax just to run it. And I'm coming from the working side of it. I've been there when we did run it, the amount of hours it took and the amount of people it took. I think you'd be much wiser right now to take that recycling next July under a 2-year deal and let's see where it goes. I believe in all the years I've been involved, you're going to find out it's just a tax burden on the citizens. But I really think it needs to go out to every citizen in there. Do you want to pay taxes out of your pocket, whether you recycle or don't recycle, to cover this? Because it's just another tax burden. And granted, I know a lot of people think this recycling is really good, but you would not believe how much of that recycling actually ends up in the landfill. I researched this. it goes from here to Missoula, from Missoula to the landfill in Helena. I just think, be cautious how you do this. Don't tie our hands up. You tie your hands up in this ordinance that you've got written right now.
That we have written.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't mean you. I meant you have written is gonna tie the public works hands, the council's hands, the city's hands, and what you do in the future. And the next time you come up for negotiations, you pass that ordinance, you're gonna find yourself, you strapped yourselves into a whole different ballgame in negotiations. And that would be my deal to the council. I think you need to look at this and be cautious how fast you move on this.
Thank you, Jim. Your experience is pretty, Teresa.
Yeah, so thanks, Jim, and I wanted to comment on a couple things. Streets aren't profitable, and you told me that. They're not assets because as soon as you put it down, it's depreciating, right? We are paying right now for recycling. We're paying out of our own pockets. And if we're not sharing that, the cost goes to the few and everyone. It is the right thing. The city has adopted the ECP, the Energy Conservation Plan, and it is dedicated to reducing our carbon footprint. So recycling does help to do that. The ordinance, the way it's written, is generic enough to say that, hey, this is what the city does. The city has a contract for collections and is going to adopt and run or operate a recycling center. So if you want to limit that to 2 years, you can put that in the same ordinance. But what the city has now is not an ordinance that says what our solid waste management system is. We have a contract that the public can't see unless they come in and ask for a copy of the contract. There's very little information out there for our public. So that's a lot of, more about why we need this holistic solid waste management system that describes both the collection of our solid waste and the rules and regulations around that, as well as the operation of the recycling center by the city. So if you want to separate it out, that's fine. But I'm just trying the idea behind the solid waste management system was to describe that for once and for all, for the first time for the city of Red Lodge. And then this also gives the sustainability board or others that might be interested in a way of saying, well, this is what the city does. Now let's try to improve that or plan around that, make it better, look for different opportunities to make it more affordable, or to look for different streams. The sustainability board, for instance, could now say, oh, we have a management system. Let's create a plan that we can submit as an application for further grants. So it doesn't have to be a money pit, and a trial is not a bad idea. But I'm just trying to say that there is a reason and a purpose for having this within like one ordinance. And I don't see how it ties your hands, and so I'd like to learn a little bit more about that.
Mayor?
Yes,
I have some thoughts on it.
please share them.
This may sound like a motion, but these are only recommendations.
Mhm.
I believe we should take over the recycling center beginning July 1st. If the current operators wish to leave prior to then, we have to thank them very much, but we would close it between when they left and July 1st. And I recommend that the recycle resolution should be a standalone project for 24 months, beginning July 1st, 2023, and that when the solid waste contract comes up for negotiation, at that time, the council can decide whether to mold it in with the negotiations with Republic or whomever we decide to negotiate with. I also recommend that the Public Works Director direct the operation of the recycle center with hours and personnel that stay within the budget provided already by our administration department and already agreed upon. And then I also recommend that the ordinance we're discussing this evening is, in my opinion, too superfluous or convoluted and at this point not necessary, and especially if it pulls in the recycle center.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any more comments or discussion points? Yes. Jen?
I guess what I would say is, in my mind, this is the first step agreeing on this documentation or this language is the first step towards our 2 public hearings where folks can have something to say about whether or not they think the city has a responsibility to provide recycling as part of our waste management system. But I would say it would seem very conspicuous to have a waste management system proposal in an ordinance that left recycling out. We either have a system that includes recycling or we don't. And I would say that the public hearing comments on this ordinance as proposed with, we've talked a little bit about a few linguistic changes, but as proposed with recycling in it, is the next step for the community to decide, does our waste management system include recycling or not? The resolution that dictates fees and how we're going to pay for the recycling center comes after this is approved. And if it's not approved, then obviously it doesn't come after. But it seems, I just don't see a reason to propose a solid waste management system ordinance that doesn't include recycling as a part of it, given that we have an energy conservation plan that includes lowering our carbon footprint by reducing the amount of trash going out of this community. And also, quite frankly, this town has never experienced in, how many years did I run the center, 15 years or something? We haven't experienced what it's like to pay for waste disposal without our recycling center. And so it doesn't make sense to me to remove it from this language, and I would like to vote, or not vote, but I'd like to leave it in here so that the next time we come back, we can have a public hearing with it in it, and we can hear from the public on whether or not they agree or disagree with that system.
I think this is the tool, the part of the thinking on this sentence, because part of the reasoning for this was to open the door. This ordinance and the introduction of it, where it first states for the first time that the city will take the operation of recycling center as its responsibility, that opens the door to that discussion with the community. So you need a vehicle. Now, if you want to wait another 2 weeks to have a separate one, and then you don't want to wait, this management system, it really doesn't make any sense to have it separated. How do we handle solid waste? And if we're going to handle our solid waste, including recycling, this is what it looks like.
Terry's a comment, and again, I support recycling as well, as Jim said, but, one of the very first things it says in here is whereas the state puts an importance and priority on the source of reduction, reuse, and recycling above the compost and the landfill disposal, there's no mention in this of reduction or reuse. So to say that you can't take out recycling doesn't seem consistent.
It doesn't say that you can't take out recycling.
No, what I'm saying is,
whereas.
but what I'm saying is they're talking about the importance of reduction, reuse, and recycling, and the only thing that's really in here is recycling, so it's not, so I'm just saying I don't see what the problem is pulling out recycling and having that be a separate ordinance at this point. Because to me, the key that I read when I read this ordinance was you were focusing on the key issues were commercial and residential waste guidelines and general services, which I think is really valuable. But I don't think at this point, since we haven't adopted recycling, whether or not we're going to do it even on a trial basis, I just don't know why we shouldn't keep that one maybe separate and look at it separately. That would be my motion, and do the trial.
Well, this is only up for discussion, so.
Would you like me to read the responses? You all asked me questions about the recycling center in particular at our last meeting.
Yes.
Would you like answers to those right
Yes,
now?
please.
Okay. And, sorry, I ate a pretzel right before this. I did provide this in a document that Lonnie can attach to the minutes, and we can refer to it in the future, and the public can take a look at it. Which also includes the further breakdown of the proposed budget, including the purchase services section, which was a question. The proposed schedule and hours of operation, as of right now, would be Sunday, Monday off. Tuesday, it would be open. It wouldn't be open to the public, but the facility coordinator would run logistics organize, prep the yard, and organize for materials pickup on Tuesdays. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday would be open to the public from 8 to 2. And 3 of those days would have BI staff for 4 hours a day. One of those days, probably Thursday, because that's what it is right now, would be like a preferred business day. Businesses could bring their recycling any of those days, but we would have like a preferred day. Drop-off fees for entities not contributing via tax assessment or water bill, or however we decide to do it, would be $10 per load for a household, $25 per load for business. The total number of nonprofit members the total number of members currently with the nonprofit outside of city limits as of the beginning of this month is 54. And that's out of, just to give you a total membership, 349 households, 41 businesses. So out of those are the totals. Well, there was a question about incentivizing business participation. So businesses pay for their own solid waste removal right now. A 2-yard bin costs $180 a month, and a business membership of $300 a year can significantly reduce the size and number of pickups a business requires. And additionally, the proposed hours of operation for business day has been extended by 2 hours, and all participating businesses can bring their recycling technically any of those days. There were a few questions from the public that I fielded since the last meeting, and I think it would be a good time to provide some answers to those questions. They'll just give us some context as we move forward. So again, total number of memberships with the nonprofit currently 349 households, 41 businesses. Question, why does it cost $100,000 to run a recycling center in our community? Are these costs for a fancy recycling center and an overabundance of staff? The proposed budget is based on the revenues and the expenditures of the nonprofit's actual figures from 2019 to current. The staff coverage proposed is based on what is currently happening at the recycling center and recommendations from the nonprofit, calculating their current staff time as well as the volunteer hours, many volunteer hours they have spent by board members and supporters to keep the facility open, track memberships, work with recycling brokers to ensure that our recycling actually gets recycled and in a timely manner, and provides consistent BI staff supervision. Question, how is raising our garbage fees by $72 a year going to save us money in contract negotiations in 5 years? The current contract ends June of 2025, a little over 2.5 years from now, which is not very long. The city has previously increased solid waste fees in 2010 and 2016 by resolution to cover ever-increasing costs of our waste disposal contracts. By the estimates of Recycle Red Lodge, the nonprofit has diverted 800,000 pounds of solid waste from the landfill annually. For comparison, in 2016, the recycling center recycled 246,000 pounds, 3% of our total waste. And in 2019, the first year the nonprofit operated, it recycled 298,000 pounds. 800,000 pounds is a significant increase and is the equivalent of more than 30 trash trucks annually. By ensuring that this waste diversion continues and increases, we have bargaining power over our next negotiations for waste disposal. We are not only reducing the amount of trash leaving our town for the landfill, we are saving waste disposal company money, time, and resources. Fewer trucks leaving, fewer staff needed to service our small town. Conversely, should the city no longer provide recycling services to the community at the level they are currently at, that waste and thus the added disposal resources needed will undoubtedly be used as justification to increase our already high contract fees for disposal. Question, most cities our size provide bins for aluminum, cardboard, paper at a minimal cost. Do we really need a person working 30 hours a week and an admin person working 10 hours a week and Beartooth Industries staff? So we are paying for both recycling services and the staff necessary to make sure that that happens well. To Jim's point, there was a time when a lot of our trash or a lot of our recycling ended up in the landfill anyway. So especially given the increase in volume the recycling center now handles, the proposed staffing is based on what the nonprofit has needed in order to ensure we have a functioning program that can manage the increased volume and generate a product that will not end up in the landfill. Any material attempting to be recycled will end up in the landfill if it's contaminated. A well-educated public and a diligent staff are required to ensure recycling streams are not contaminated. And it is true that some other communities offer limited recycling services via unattended bins for aluminum, cardboard, etc. The contents are often contaminated and end up in the landfill, and our recycling center offers compost, which food waste is 30 to 40% of all material thrown away, glass, one of the only facilities in Montana that does so, and electronics, in addition to metals, cardboard, paper, and plastics 1 and 2. Red Lodge offers more options for residents to reduce their carbon footprint, decrease the tonnage going to our landfill, and ensure that the recycling stream is not contaminated. Last comment. We already have an ordinance that addresses solid waste. We have a resolution specifically addressing our current contract with our waste disposal company. We do not currently have an ordinance that outlines our city's waste management system. Thanks for letting me take that time.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So I heard composting, so are we going to continue, is your thought is in this recycling, we would continue the composting?
That's what part of the contract is included in the budget.
Okay. Because I think Jim had some fairly
Composting.
significant things to say about that.
What type of compost are you collecting and where are you gonna store this? Because you compost, it grows, and it takes years. Compost doesn't compost over a couple of months, it takes
We
years.
contract with a company that uses anaerobic bacteria to compost it. We've been doing it for 2
They come haul it
3 years.
away?
Yeah.
At what expense?
It's on the budget. Let's see here. I just shut it down. Sorry. It's on budget.
What's it called, Swift Bucket?
Bucket.
Is that what it's called?
Swift Bucket contract, $3,600 a year.
No matter what the tonnage is.
That's
Okay.
what the current contract is for.
Do we have any idea how much tonnage they're hauling off? And how are they collecting it and loading it? And that's my question.
I can get you those answers.
I was unaware of any composting going on there and how they're hauling it, loading it.
Things have changed quite a bit since the volunteer group, the nonprofit took over.
It's not technically composting. I think it's got some other name, because it's not that traditional composting. It's more of a chemical compost, and they make fertilizer and things out of it.
I have one other question on something I don't think we've covered yet, and I just had a question about how we're gonna identify residents versus non-residents, and if there's gonna be someone that's gonna be monitoring the gate as people go in. Because typically that has not been the Beartooth Industries people. It's been like, for example, Ann's doing it now. So is that in the budget to fund someone to do that,
Yes,
to collect money and stuff?
yes.
Okay, so where is that? Is that under a contractor or where would that be?
That's another facility. It's the facilities
Because I saw
coordinator.
Beartooth Industries, and the only reason I'm asking is I saw Beartooth Industries broken out, right? And I saw the facility coordinator, which I assume is that Kyle, the Kyle type person? And so that's why I was wondering, I didn't see anybody else listed.
Kyle is the person that's currently checking memberships and things like that, so it would be the equivalent of that.
He's usually on the forklift. Isn't Ann working right now doing that? Every time I've gone, she's.
We also have Hannah Coley present here, and I think she'd probably be
Hi,
willing to offer any kind of clarifications if you need any. To the
Yeah,
best
I
of her
don't know how the
knowledge.
budget was broken down, if Christina took that, but, Anne is a paid, she's not contracted out, she's an employee currently, so I'm sure she kind of put that in the budget, I'm not sure if that was full in the facility coordinator, because the hours would be, or the hours are currently reduced to what you guys are talking about staying into, so I guess that she just added Anne's couple 8 hours a week, I think it is, into that budget, I would guess, I can't confirm that, but she is paid employee, and then contractor would be admin fee, and then there's the industry.
Yeah,
Right, so into the.
may have been after that. Because how long has Ann worked there?
Not long.
That's what I was
We had
thinking.
somebody else working there, I mean, Alex for a few weeks, but she didn't last very long, it was kind of safe that. position, but we've had that position open for a few months at least, and still.
I just really want to clarify for tonight, like how we're going, like the fees and how we're actually going to cover it. This ordinance is saying this community wants recycling to be part of our waste management system, and we're going to figure out how to do it. And then the next piece of that, we have to do that in order to get to the piece of it where then we can bring in the conversation around, do we do it via tax assessment? Do we do it via monthly bill? Do we do it via an unmanned bin? I mean, but this has to happen first. And the original thing that we passed said we would look into researching, and this is the data that we've come up with. And so again, the next step would just be putting this to the community to say, do you want to pay for recycling? This is how it could look.
Yeah.
And then we get to the resolution that actually assigns fees and how.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I understand that, but I guess the thing is, if you provide a budget, I'm assuming that people are gonna look at this and think that this is the bottom line it's gonna cost. And if there's things that I've identified that I don't see on there, I just wanna make sure that they're covered or they're somewhere embedded in this. Because that's the whole reason we have a budget, right?
Between admin and facilities coordinator is where that management is happening now at the recycling center via the nonprofit. We took their budget and turned it into this budget.
So, but putting in that level of detail in an ordinance would tie your hands. That's why it's specifically generic to say this is how the city does this, right? So if we have solid waste collection through a contract, we didn't say it's through a certain company, we didn't say it's a certain cost, we didn't say, that part is just spelled out, but the other part that's important is to say that the city is going to take on the recycling facility and the operation, and that's what we're trying to forward for.
I get that. My only point was that if you're gonna say it's going to cost $6 a month and provide a budget that's justifying that, I just want to make sure I understand that it is gonna be $6 a month and it's not gonna turn out to be 10, that's all.
And those two things are in the resolution that is forthcoming, not in this
It
ordinance.
doesn't belong in the ordinance. The only thing that belongs in the ordinance.
I wasn't talking about the ordinance, because I still said we should pull that
That's what
out.
we're trying to talk about is the ordinance, because we can't get to any of the public input and hearing from people about if they like this or not, if we don't take this first step, which we said we would take when we all voted yes on the resolution to
look at it.
to look at it.
Right, and I guess
And that's
what
what
I'm
we're
just
doing.
saying, what we talked about this morning, we wanted people to entertain was just pulling out the recycling and having that be one piece separate from what this ordinance is, and having more of a recycling ordinance. And again, maybe we can vote on that if people think that may be
I
a
think the public
better
can
approach.
discern the difference between the collection portion of the ordinance and the recycling portion. That's just my opinion.
It's a little hypocritical to have a sustainability plan that includes recycling, and there's another plan we have that includes recycling, and then not include recycling. I mean, we need to look at the impact of the decisions made by the council before us, and that should be a consideration. The second thing I would like to comment on is how would this, if the current recycling entity doesn't want to continue beyond the first, at what point in time would we discuss the gap that is left? Because that will leave, it will be costly to resume with no waste channels in place, no employees in place. I think whatever we do needs to accommodate that gap. Somehow it needs to be anticipated and covered, because I don't think it's responsible to leave, and the conversations we have.
If you do disrupt the service, then it's going to be a startup again later, and it's going to be more costly. It's going to take more time to rebuild all of those streams where it goes today, and those agreements with other delivery or disposal services or whatever it is that's in place. But this was the idea is that this is generic enough that you can renegotiate any other contract you want to or rework it in. But as far as the recycling, right, that piece alone, within this, we did state that, you know, the disruption of service would be more costly to the city and detrimental. So the idea would be to somehow the operation, you know, there has to be a plan behind this, but you don't put a whole plan for transition into an ordinance. So maybe those are the pieces that need more conversation. Is like, what is the entire plan for the transition, not just the ordinance? And a resolution about the fees and the mechanisms for the fund are yet one piece of that plan, and they would come later. Should we accept or state that the city is going to take the recycling center on? So, you know, maybe there is something we can do in addition to the ordinance that helps everybody with this discussion, right? Say, what is the transition plan, right? The bigger picture.
Perhaps what we could do is just change the wording in this to say that the city supports recycling, you know, whatever means that may be, whether or not we end up with an MOU with another company to take it on, or we take it on ourselves. You know, because right now we do have an MOU with a nonprofit group to use that facility. I absolutely do support recycling. It's just, I did say this at the admin meeting this morning. I just want to be careful about what we're asking of our taxpayers, and that support is there. So I think that what this plan moving forward, I like the idea that it spells out the responsibilities of the city versus the responsibilities of the citizens, you know, and what you can and can't throw away, you know, what you can, the guidelines are there. And it'll create that framework for the city to have additional information on their website, you know, what you can throw away and what you can't throw away, because there are absolutely, you know, hazardous materials, things like that. You don't want that thrown away. And to move it forward, I just think maybe we could tweak the language a little bit and then have that separate conversation on the recycling.
To support something versus say that you're going to take it and operate it are worlds apart. We have an ECP that says we support recycling already. The city's already adopted that.
And also, let's just be clear here. We're trying to anticipate public reaction at a public hearing.
Right.
So there's nothing else in this ordinance this is just outlining what is already happening, really. Like, our residents already know they can't throw paint down there, you know, in the trash can. So essentially, my argument is leave recycling in here as a part of the waste management plan and put it to the public for 2 hearings. And if we resoundingly hear we don't want to pay for recycling as a part of our town, then we have our answer. But I don't think we should preemptively remove stuff just to, you know, like, the whole point is to have the hearing and hear from the constituents.
This is a tool that opens the door to that discussion with the public, right, for the hearings. If we don't move anything forward, then, you know, like I said, you're welcome to create a separate one that's just recycling, but you're how many weeks out of that? I mean, we've been trying to hash this out and get something forward for that purpose of bringing it to the public for discussion. And then they can, you know, we can hear, you know, about whether or not they want it, and, you know, whether we just say, okay, we don't have recycling, or we do. And then we need to follow up with the mechanism, the resolutions that would describe the fees.
Right, because us voting on this tonight to move it forward for further discussion, and most importantly to the public to give input, that's what I'm interested in, is that I don't know how this is all going to go, what people's public input is going to be, but I firmly believe that we need to move forward so that we can get that public feedback. And then based on that public feedback, we can modify, strike, throw the whole thing away, who knows? But
So are we voting on something tonight?
No,
We should just say,
well, to agree to move this forward.
for a public hearing at the next meeting.
And my only comment to that was, and the reason why I thought at the beginning that we should keep the recycling, you know, the actual, do we take it or don't we take it back, was to not hold this up for that, I guess, you know, but then we did, Teresa and I did work on it, and we did get it in there. So, I mean, I say, there's a lot of work that went into that plan, and I just don't necessarily want that to hold it up.
Any further discussion? All right, we'll have it on the agenda for the next meeting. Yes.
Well, I did want to add that, of course, I made it known to everybody else, right, when we knew that this was coming up for discussion. This hasn't been crossed our city attorney's desk yet, so we'll see what other comments and recommendations for edits or anything else that could be added to this that make it either different or more meaningful. We'll see.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, next up is new business, and the meeting of November 8th, that happens to be election day, and so we would like to postpone or move that date to Monday. Monday?
Well, the 9th would be, right? Second Wednesday.
November
of the
8th
month.
is
I think
election day.
Well, the 9th is Wednesday.
It's usually planning board always.
We can do it
Board night.
Monday, or Wednesday, but there is a meeting on Wednesday.
We can't really do it.
So, that's right, because you're on planning board, so.
Oh, they're in here, planning board is here.
Well, there's that too.
I move to move our November 8th city council meeting to November 7th.
I'll second. I'll second. Any discussion?
Sounds good. Sounds doable.
Roll call?
Adams?
Yes.
Vitale?
Yes.
Durbin?
Yes.
Eaton?
Yes.
Ronnie?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
All right.
That was the meeting.
And the next thing up is standing committee reports. So, we'll have an introduction for what's going on with each committee, and then we'll have a brief period for council comments or questions. First up is admin and finance with Jen.
Did it again, I put one of these in my mouth. Okay, so admin, committee meeting. First item that we discussed actually was that, Jody has graciously offered to chair this committee until the short-term rental committee that I am currently sitting on dissolves in December. So thank you, Jody, for that. I very much appreciate that. Next, we talked about this draft ordinance 959 a lot. I don't think I need to rehash any of that. We also talked about, Jody has done some research on some similar platforms to the TextMyGov platform. So this idea that we would have a texting tool that we could communicate to the community with, and also that the community could communicate to us with. She's working with Lonnie to get a couple other companies with similar platforms to come and give us presentations so that we have kind of a more than one company to look at in terms of options. We talked a little bit about the fact that 2024 is actually right around the corner, and that the city will be, the community will be, that there'll be a motion on the ballot in 2024 to ask the residents whether or not we should look into other forms of city government. So that includes a city manager option versus a mayor option. There's like 3 different options. Anyway, we talked about the importance of starting to talk now with the community about those different types of government, and making sure that everyone was informed by the time that that ballot vote comes around, and that it's up to us to kind of help keep the public informed. We had an update on the admin department hiring process, and it looks like, if all goes well, we'll have a new full-time admin person, starting before the end of the month, which is really exciting. And then we talked a little bit about, the events application and kind of decided that next step for that is gonna come from other committees. That's what we talked about.
Any questions for the admin and finance committee?
Could either Jen or anyone else on that committee talk more about what the TextMyGov platform and the alternate, like, what are they for?
Sure. Lonnie arranged a demo with TextMyGov, and basically it allows mass texting, especially during disasters, emergencies. It also, street closures, water shut-off, that type of thing. You have to subscribe to it. So you would get, anytime the city needed to send out a mass text to our citizens, you would get it on your phone. Some of the other ones that we're looking at, there's of course always the big Cadillac version, and that includes basically it becomes like a 311 center where you can instant message over our website and you talk to an AI person, and then it'll say, do you want to talk to a real person? And it gives the city employees the ability to basically, just message on your computer with someone, on their phone or on their computer. And then with those type of ones, you could actually send applications or forms to them. The city could, in that case, if you have like a business's phone number to text us, you could actually email out the business renewals. You could email out bills. Like I say, that one had no price, so it might be a little much for our small town, but we are going to pursue getting a demo from them as well. And then there's one that is called, is like the lower end, and it runs about $30 or $40 a month. So, but it would still do the same basic mass text. So we're going to get a demo from them as well. So.
Thanks, Jody.
Yeah.
It's similar to the code red that the county has.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Yes.
in regard to 2024 and the discussion of perhaps a city manager, I think if we're going to even consider this, we have to put it out there for the public's input. And we were discussing this morning of creating a committee, an 18-month committee of one council person and perhaps 4 citizens to garner as much information as we can. To make a charter change like this is going to be like turning an aircraft carrier. You have to start early. And that's why we should keep this, or at least I'm requesting it, that we keep it on the front burner and consider creating a committee that expires in so many months so that we can get as much information as we can so the public can digest it and we can digest it and decide whether we go on a ballot in May of 2024 and then again in November of 2024. This all has to be done at certain timing. Lonnie certainly gave us some guidance this morning, and we would reach out to Angela also because they have done several things like this. But it has to begin way out, and now is way out.
Thank you. I have heard Dan Clark speak on this, and I believe that he offers a training for all municipalities in Montana because I think we are all on the same 10-year plan. But if you want to do anything, I would suggest that somebody contact Dan Clark and find out, because he's very careful about this sort of thing, and I think that he brings the class to council in preparation for that with the timelines and what the steps need to be taken. So and I know that we have a training. We've discussed a training for the new council in January when we know who the new council will be. But I would suggest that those steps be taken with your idea, something like that.
Yeah, and
In accordance with what you said.
And the local government center, their 3rd edition, as I referenced to when I distributed some information directly addresses this. And that's how we should get our guidance too. But it needs to start soon.
We certainly want to be prepared for that, yeah. All right, Public Works, Terry.
Yeah, so it's me. So, let's see, one thing that we update as part of the Public Works Committee is the Public Works Capital Improvement Projects update. And so we had some discussion about that document. So what it essentially does is, as time progresses, some of those priorities change. Jim dictates those, and so I've been kind of keeping track of that and then adding on their questions that people have asked about Public Works that we provided answers. So we thought that would be useful to have for the public to view, but it sounds like there may be issues with that, so I'm going to run it by Dennis and see what he says. And so if he's okay with us publishing that, then that'll be up there along with the meeting minutes of the Public Works Committee. So that's something new. We spent most of our time talking about Ordinance 959 as well, and so it was, I thought, a really good discussion. And then I just had one kind of related question just for Teresa, that if we had any feedback or any edits on that, would you be willing to entertain that? Should we just send them to you via email or?
Well, I don't own it, so I think it's really.
Where would we direct those?
That's why we need the hearing and you guys can propose amendments at that time if you want to provide some heads up or thoughts ahead, but it's not for me to just go in and change by myself. There's really, there's.
So would it be, so who should, if I have that input, where do I just direct it to you and Jody and
Your Public
Jen?
Works, so if you want to take ownership of it, that's fine.
Well, I didn't author it, so, but maybe Jody can, if you want to, because she's Public Works. Well, no, I'm just trying to say, I didn't author it, so I'm just trying to think
No,
of
you
who.
can send me, I'll try to figure out where to direct it and
Okay.
get the right answer. So that the idea is not to completely overhaul what we had discussed today before we see it again another time.
Right.
If we want to move on with any public hearing and reading of it, right?
Well, why don't I send you these, and then you can see the scope of what they are and see if there's something you would want, that you would consider incorporating before then, so.
Would
I'll
you
do that.
like to prepare an alternative version, and then we could have?
No, it sounds like overwhelmingly people want to go forward with this, so I'm fine with it. I'm just saying that if there is extra input.
I receive your comments.
Yeah, I'll just send them to you, like I say, for
I just
consideration.
can't promise anything.
No, I'm not asking for that. I'm just
We'll
saying,
route it, yeah.
look at it, and some of them are things that are just kind of edits, so
Mhm.
that aren't, so I'll go ahead and do that. And I think that was pretty much it for Public Works.
Any questions for Public Works?
Didn't we get a new plow?
You mentioned.
Yes,
Yeah.
we moved on it, we made the purchase agreement.
That's exciting news.
We just approved in the budget to pay for it, and then we will have it transported out, and be a very needed piece of equipment.
All right, on to Public Health and Safety, Terry.
Okay, so, basically, let's see, as far as the fire district and update from that meeting that happens once a month, that hasn't happened yet, so there's no update on that. The whole thing about, getting a resource officer or enforcement officer, that's gonna be on hold until after the first of the year. But if there's any pre-work that happens, we'll update that and put that in the minutes. The other thing that we're working on, again, is looking at ordinances, and I think we mentioned this last time. So the ordinances that we're looking at now to update that are prioritized would be around fireworks, the one about the one-wheels and motorized mobility devices on the sidewalks. And I think that was, that was about it for, and then Teresa had a new item that she brought up today that that's new business that we're going to be looking at. There was a suggestion for the mayor to add a monthly summary report from the judge, which would be similar to what Chief Schrock does and provides the city council. And the purpose of that would be to educate, the city council and heighten public awareness. So if you want to
Could you
consider that.
repeat that?
Yeah, there's a suggestion to add a monthly summary report from the judge. Apparently, he generates a similar type of report the police department does. And so to heighten awareness, if you'd like to include that as well.
It's a record of dispositions, and it just gives the public an idea of what the city court does do, and the judge,
Yeah,
you know, what is being managed through our city court.
yeah.
And so it's just a light report that he could produce, and you could see that once a month, just like you do the police department report.
It doesn't have any personal information on it.
No, it's all been redacted. or
No
whatever.
PPI, yeah.
No PPI. And then the other thing Teresa's going to be looking into is resolutions and ordinances that pertain to compensation associated with the judgeship and making any kind of necessary tweaks to that.
All right, any questions for public health and safety? All right, moving on to land use and planning, Teresa.
All right, so land use and planning, we did talk about the code enforcement, the general effort towards finding COPS grants. And since the discussion keeps leaning towards SROs and additional law enforcement, hiring, that really, we recognize that there's a difference between the building code enforcement that we're looking for while we're talking about land use and planning. So Kelly, volunteered to look into Laurel and what they did to hire and look at the job description of their code enforcement officer, which is not a full-fledged police officer, but has some level of certification. So that might be a separate stream or an effort towards trying to figure out code enforcement for building and zoning regulations, apart from all the other stuff. And then we did talk about Ordinance 893 and realized that really the focus right now should be on 928. 928 is the ordinance that speaks about the use of city-owned property or use of city-owned or managed property. So we want to make some changes to that in order to tweak our application and clarify the application process and the regulations around that. And so that's where we're very focused right now. And that's about it. We're going to continue working on that, hopefully have something in front of City Council in short order, because we know that in the new year, we're going to want to entertain a number of different special events. We also have just checked on a couple different action items. We looked at, we got a nice update from Courtney about the 19th Street Bridge, which really doesn't belong to our land use and planning standing committee, but we were just curious about what was happening there. And we made sure that we forwarded someone that was in the audience, our standing committee, last council meeting back, that the suggestion for the sidewalk, as well as the a sidewalk on 19th Street Bridge, as well as looking into the completion of a trail or sidewalk up the lower portion of, everybody calls it Brewery Hill, but Highway 78. So on Highway 78 trail, Kelly had looked into and spoke with Zach, sorry, I lost his last name, Kelly. Zach Kirkemo in
It was a hard one.
Kirkemo.
Yeah, Zach Kirkemo.
And learned that there's an encroachment application that could be filled out by the city and returned. But some of the primary questions the city had, or the MDT had for the city was, okay, you get the money, you get all these collaborations, and we go ahead and we build it, who's going to maintain it? So we discussed a couple different things there, but it sounds like we can walk through some of the activities that help us to determine whether or not it's actually a viable project. And so thank you, Kelly, for looking into that. And then we talked to Courtney about what were some of the other higher priorities on our workbook that we could now kind of take on since we've removed a couple items. And I'll be looking into the lot aggregation guidelines and making an appointment with our city attorney in short order. And that's about it. I think that's where we parked our meeting today.
Any questions for land use and planning?
Yes.
All right. If there's any correspondence, it's in your packet. I don't believe there is any correspondence.
No.
And so with that, we have a motion. Oh,
One thing, chats with council. Oh, so, yeah, the one thing I wanted to say is Chatsworth Council is happening again on Thursday. It's at 9 o'clock over at Catskill Bakery, and it's going to be Jody, Pete, and myself. So we hope you'll come and join us and talk to us. That's it.
And just a reminder that the candidate forum is also on Thursday
Yep.
at the Elks at 6 PM. And that's going to be all the candidates that are running for office, not just city council members, but
Yeah.
state representatives and county, Justice of the Peace.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of good people there talking about why they're running.
There's also the short-term,
I know.
the workforce housing
Yeah.
meeting at the Community Foundation, at the Roosevelt Center. Is that where it is?
She's here.
At 6 o'clock.
Carol, right, yeah.
It's the same time.
Same time.
Same day.
But they have other options, they can go
Everything's
to for that at least.
Yeah, there's a online
One in
one.
Robert,
There's 3 of them or something.
yeah.
Oh, the forums will be recorded and put on the Facebook page of the Elks.
Great.
Yeah, go to both meetings. With the option.
Thank you.
Review it.
Thank you.
If anybody would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.